Good morning. I'm now going to call the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget work session to order. I'm going to turn it over to the Finance Director, Alicia Searcy, at this time.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you all for coming, and we're going to work through this budget this morning. The first thing that we have up is the state court. We have the state court judge, Michael Hubbard, the solicitor, Becky Jackson, and the clerk of court, Alan Lee, with us this morning to talk about adding a second state court. You should have three documents in front of you, one from the clerk of court, one from the state court judge, and one that I created that summarizes what they will be talking about this morning. And Commissioner Chance has been on the committee to review this, so he may have some input once they're complete.
Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Michael Hubbard. I'm the state court judge here in Carroll County. First time I've ever had the opportunity to come before you, so thanks for having me. I've met most of you. Some of you I haven't met. I was your chief magistrate for about a year. I then became your state court judge. It's been about 14 months or so. And I'm coming before you today to talk to you about the volume of the state court and the possibility of creating a second state court. For those of you, and I'm going to be very brief and very concise, for those of you that aren't familiar with the state court, on the criminal side, we prosecute all the misdemeanors in the county, including all the traffic offenses. And on the civil side, any cases that involve simply money relief, we resolve, and there's no limit on the civil side. We do $1 million cases, $1 billion cases. So the volume of the state court, when you consider the unlimited civil side and the number of criminal and traffic cases, the volume in state court is just massive. I often say state court's not where you want to be if you're claustrophobic. Our volume is considerably heavier than the other courts. And so what I put before you today, the page with the yellow highlights on it, those numbers came from the state of Georgia. And the state of Georgia determines state court caseload by the total number of incoming cases divided by the total number of state courts. So if you think which county has the highest state court volume, you would think, well, Cobb County gets a lot of cases, but Cobb County has 12 state courts. So the numbers that are before you today, those don't count existing caseload. Those don't count the backload that we're all dealing with due to COVID. That's simply the onslaught of new cases that are coming through the door. And as you see, we by far have the heaviest caseload in the Atlanta metro area. We're more than double the average. I didn't want to bore you with giving you all the numbers in the state, but I can tell you we're second in the state only to Houston County, and Houston kind of has a unique situation. So I'm coming before you today to share those numbers, answer any questions that you have.
I just told you I wasn't going to ask you a question, but I think we have some handouts here talking about the revenue or to offset the cost of this. Do you want to highlight any of that?
I'd be happy to. I often hear the word revenue. What I'll always explain, we'll have somebody come to court and, they're not happy about a citation. And they'll say something to the effect of, well, this is just a money grab. Y'all just want my wallet. And I always explain to them the cost of prosecution is through the roof. Law enforcement vehicles aren't free. Law enforcement officers don't work for free. The courthouse wasn't built for free. The training, the equipment, the staff, the costs are staggering. And I believe it is the duty of every court to recover as much of the cost of prosecution as possible to keep that off of the Carroll County taxpayer. And I'm a Carroll County taxpayer, have been for years. As long as it's fair and as long as it's equitable, I believe it's the duty of the court. So we don't hide that. We don't apologize for that. I point blank tell you that is part of what the court is there to do. And I'm sure Ms. Searcy will back me up on this. Because of the volume of the state court, we recover significantly more cost than any other court, probably more than several courts combined. So much so that I'm proud to say we completely pay for ourselves. And there's no question, if you approve this much-needed second state court, it will pay for itself, which I respectfully submit kind of makes it a no-brainer in my mind.
Commissioners Reynolds, you had a question?
No, I agree with a no-brainer.
I was hesitant to say that, but whew, I feel better now.
And, Judge, just some quick arithmetic here. That's going to put us, if we add a judge, that's going to put us at about what the state average is here.
Very close. You know, if you look at the second column, you see the big boys separated from the really big boys. I know we're just slightly behind Douglas County and Coweta County in population. They both just approved their third state court, but I don't think we're anywhere near that. I don't think we're going to be there for a while. I think we're way past due for a second court, but if you'll give us that, I think that's all we're going to need for many years to come. I know our population's increasing every year, but I'm in there every day. I see the volume. I see what's needed, and I'm confident the second state court will more than get us there.
So if this gets approved, what kind of timeline are you talking about having this judge in place? Do we have the facilities?
Yes, sir. When the courthouse was built, the third floor is where state court is. You have two state court courtrooms, 3A and 3B. So I'm in 3A almost every day. 3B is mostly just dark. You have two state court chambers for two state court judges. I'm in one. Judge Hightower from Superior Court is temporarily using the other chambers. But the courthouse, when it was built in 2012, was built with the understanding that there was going to be a second state court. So the equipment, the facilities, it's all there. It's all just ready for somebody to come in and sit in the chair. As far as the timeline goes, the legislature, and Mr. Jackson can weigh in on this if I'm wrong, but the legislature has to approve the court, and the governor has to appoint the new judge. But it's my understanding, and I've spoken to members of the legislature, that that's really 90% you. That once you give them a letter approving it, they just run with it, and it's just almost a formality at that point. They do have a judicial commission that makes sure there's an appropriate caseload to warrant the position, but as you can see, that should take about 5 seconds.
Yes, sir. Okay.
I'll chime in. My work here on the committee, myself and Ms. Searcy and Mr. Jackson, we kind of tried to work together and think of all the different angles. I did meet with Judge Hubbard a couple different occasions. Also, Alan Lee, our clerk, our solicitor, Becky Jackson, Sheriff Langley, and also the probation services are something that would be affected by this. So we tried to think of everywhere that this second court would touch other departments and what would their needs be. And so we came up with the expenditures that we believe will adequately cover everything. Also work with HR. We got some basic numbers and then added in some averages of what we think benefits would be. Obviously, we don't know when we hire an employee if they're going to come in single, unmarried on benefits, or they're going to come in with a spouse and 4 dependents on that as well. So some of these numbers are going to be a little bit fluid. Another thing that we did on the revenue side is we tried to look at the numbers. So state court takes in revenue that not everything necessarily comes to Carroll County. So everything that comes to Carroll County, to the BOC side, if you will, through our accounting, we took that percentage and we tried to find what that number was, and then we took 80% of that, trying to have a conservative number that we think that we can replicate 80% of revenue in that second court, at least starting out. And we know that there's going to be a little bit of playing here. We may have some employees that need to be hired on the front end. And then we are obviously not going to take in all the revenue, but we're also not going to expense all the expenditures that are going to be made up of that second court. So this first year is going to have to be massaged through a little bit, but ultimately I think the committee wanted to bring to you within 12 to 18 months. This is ultimately, if you approve this, this is where we're going to end up. And so I think through the chairman's leadership and through finance and the committee, we will be able to massage through trying to keep those numbers as balanced as we can through that first year to making sure that we can make this work. But ultimately, this is where we think we'll end up. But I feel very confident about the 80% of revenue. I know that Judge Hubbard and his team has also gone through and looked at some of the fine structures and fee structures. Some of those have not been updated in quite some time, and so there's going to be some adjustments there just to bring us up to speed of what many other courts are doing. And as he stated, it's not just about just trying to drain people's wallets, but if we're threefold behind everyone else, just like we are in not having a second state court, we need to bring some things up. So I feel very confident on the revenue side that all of this is going to work out. And I do want to compliment, besides the team that is here today, Judge Tysinger came before us after Judge Sullivan. I know Judge Sullivan did a great job through his long tenure at Carroll County. Judge Tysinger came before us, brought some things to our attention that we tried to work through as best we could that first year that she was in office, and then now she is in Superior Court. Judge Hubbard has came on, and we've continued down this path of trying to work with making state court better. Another thing in this budget is going to be an increase in trying to work with, we know it is the public defenders, but I think in this particular situation, it's the court-appointed attorneys. They are separate than Mary Ellen's office, so those particular public defenders do not necessarily work in state court, so you've got a different set of expenditures there. And so that is another line item that needed to be brought up to speed to ensure that we can have some court-appointed attorneys. And so even with all of those adjustments, I do feel that the revenues will definitely exceed the expenditures, given that the first year is going to be a little bit of a massaging episode, if you will, to make sure that we can get through where we need to be after 12 or 18 months. So I feel confident about what's here before you today. And I know that the numbers, we didn't just say bring in some numbers and then everybody just took it for face value. We did a lot of research, investigation. We went back and forth with each other. So there was a good bit of time spent on this to bring this before you today.
Commissioner Chance, to meet the timeline, are we good with putting this on the June agenda to vote on as a separate item?
I think so, yes, ma'am.
One last point I negated to say that the request is that you approve the second state court, but part of my budget meeting with Ms. Searcy is to kind of give a much needed boost to the current state court, because ultimately the second state court couldn't start until July 1st of 2025. So she is going to be recommending a budget increase that I hope you'll consider.
So you're saying the earliest this could start would be July the 1st of 2025?
Yes, sir. The ball has to be rolling much sooner than that to go through
Yes.
the process of the state legislature and the governor and that kind of thing. But unless there's some run around it that I'm not familiar with, I believe July 1st is the first date that it would officially be there. But we can certainly ramp up our current court, and we'll do so if you'll approve our budget.
I think we'd have a resolution for the board if the board chose to adopt this plan, and that resolution would be directed toward the legislature, and our local representatives would submit that at the next session, and we would want to get that to them probably, well, we'd get it passed with the budget and then submit it to them in the fall, and then they would take that before the legislature during the session, and if that's approved and signed by the governor, then most of the courts are starting July 1 is when the process starts.
And I would like to state one final thing. One thing that we thought about was the ability for the court as Carroll County grows, or for instance, as we have other mechanisms that may give traffic citations, so on and so forth. We believe built into these numbers, and that's why we're wanting to adequately staff the second court, that they have got a capacity to grow within. So in other words, we're not opening this second state court while they've got plenty to do. They will have the ability to grow in capacity, if you will, which is something that we want to make sure that we're not, every year just having to come back with a large increase. So that was another thing that was taken in consideration. Where did the staff level need to be to ensure that both of these courts can not only handle what's before them and the backlog, but hopefully as Carroll County grows, they can continue to handle the increased capacity.
Well, thank you for your consideration. I'll yield to my colleagues.
Good morning, everybody. I know you all, but I'll introduce myself again. My name's Becky Jackson. I'm the Solicitor General of Carroll County. So I prosecute on the criminal side all of the misdemeanors in Carroll County. I've been the solicitor since 2020, and before that I was the Chief Assistant Solicitor under Doug Vassy since 2017. So just speaking on the criminal side of state court, I think the second state court will help us to prosecute all of the cases in a timely manner and more effectively than we have been in the past. Our caseload is so huge that some of the cases become very old. We lose officers. The victims either move on, lose touch with us, or lose interest in the case. Defendants move away and we can't find them anymore. So if we were able to prosecute these cases in a timelier fashion, we would be more effective at our prosecution. We would get the victims justice sooner rather than later, and hopefully stop some of the defendants from reoffending. Oftentimes they commit another crime before we are able to punish them to stop them from wanting to do this again, and also to rehabilitate them. A good example, one of the cases we just tried last week, the defendant had moved to Hawaii. Luckily, we were able to find him. One of the victims had died, and so his testimony was obviously not allowed in court. And the defendant had reoffended before we were able to try this case from 2020. So I am hoping to help Carroll County citizens by having this second state court. My office is committed, as is Judge Hubbard, to moving these cases as best we can, as effectively as we can, so that our court will be more efficient. You never know when a state court case is gonna affect you. It could be a traffic accident to someone stealing from you, and we deal with just all types of citizens, all types of defendants, and all types of victims. And I'm hoping for justice to be heard quicker and again more effectively. And if we are able to do that, I think we will be recovering more of the costs as well. The older a case gets, the harder it is to prosecute, and the harder it is for me to punish them, to find them, to make sure this doesn't happen again, but to recover some of those costs of our officers going out there, the cost of prosecution, as the judge mentioned. So our criminal caseload is quite large, and I think the second state court would help us to keep control of those numbers. Does anybody have any questions for me? All right. Thank you.
Morning. So I'm Alan Lee. I'm your elected clerk of Superior Court and appointed clerk of State Court, and I'm proud to be here this morning. I appreciate y'all having me. I'm going to be very, very brief, although I am going to give a plug for the second court, state court here, because I see it from a unique perspective of sitting right in the middle of the whole thing. You guys see what we're presenting today. I want you to know from my perspective, I don't come to you unless we need something. And I'm here today to tell you that we've been needing a state court, second state court, for years and years and years. Judge Sullivan did a good job, but I feel like he was kind of like my predecessor. The system had outgrown the system in place. So we're at a point where we have a team here, and a judge and a solicitor that is motivated to actually get things done a lot faster than what they've been done in the past. And I mean, I think the gut feeling I have is the public has the feeling when they come to state court, or used to have the feeling when they come to state court, that if they just sometimes hired an attorney or came in and pled not guilty, that they could delay, and then we're just in the situation where Ms. Jackson was talking about, where we're 4 years down the road and we can't find our victims, we can't find the officers anymore because they've moved on. Sometimes people have died. It's the same thing with paying restitution. If we're 4 years down the road, how do I find that victim to get them their restitution sometimes? So the whole system itself has fallen apart because of the backlog that we've got, and COVID was a lot of that too. But we're moving cases, we're reaching back into that backlog, and we're trying to get these things done the hiring of extra court-appointed attorneys. They're working some of the back cases, so those things are bringing in extra revenue. And I feel like if we can constantly move cases towards trial or towards plea or whatever it is that happens with that, even sometimes a dismissal, but mostly towards trial, these defendants have a more motivated reason to finish their cases, which in turn creates the little bit of revenue that we're talking about to help sustain the court. So I have the privilege of only asking for a small piece of this, but I wanted you to know that it takes more than an army almost to have a court day. We have deputies that are in the courtroom. We have one of my clerks in the courtroom, sometimes two, if it's just according to what we're doing. DUIs are paperwork intensive, so it takes sometimes two of our people to keep up. It takes the prosecutors, it takes the probation, it takes the public defender if they're actually working in the case, the other attorneys. It takes an army to get through that court date. So we're asking for this as a big picture item here, so that you understand that it's not just about putting a second judge in place. It's more about getting a court set up. So that's going to take manpower. And my piece of that puzzle, I feel like the little paper I gave you is I spent yesterday, and I apologize, I should have done this earlier. Our clerks of Superior Court are at conference this week down in St. Simon, so nobody wanted to answer my phone calls. They're having fun down there doing their thing. But I did call as many state courts as I could get on the phone yesterday, and I put together these little numbers that I got for you about, and I've come to find out that some of these numbers don't reflect the new judges that they've approved. So like you might see, I think Douglas County's he said there's a third judge. They told me two because they haven't put that judge in place yet. But I did a little averaging, and this morning I threw out all the bigger numbers on the clerks per judge that I had listed on there, and just went with the numbers like 5.5 and under and averaged those. And it's looking like maybe 4 clerks per judge is pretty much a good low average. And what I'd like to ask you for is 1. Which would put us at 7 clerks in my office working with 2 state court judges. That's 4 per, or that'd be 4 per. No, I'm talking about. That'd be give us enough. We're not asking for 2 is what I'm getting at. We don't need 4 per. I think we can get by with just 1 deputy clerk. And actually, I have 1 desk available in my office, so that would be another reason for me not to ask for 2. But I think that's going to be sufficient for us. We're working that caseload the way it is now, and I just feel like there's no reason to ask for more than what we need on something like that. Now, if Carroll County busts in the seams and the caseload doubles, we may have to come back to the table later on. But I believe that we can effectively handle working 2 judges, working 2 separate avenues towards the end. If you get my drift here, judges like to do things their way, so it's a little easier to have clerks attached to that judge that know exactly what that judge wants to do. So that's kind of the mindset here. We want to have a team of my clerks working with 1 judge so that we keep that system moving like it is now. Anybody got any questions?
I have 1 comment and 1 question. First of all, congratulations to you, Alan, for winning the National Clerk of Court Award
Well, it wasn't
a couple months ago.
national in Georgia, let's put it that way.
Okay. Well, congratulations to you. I know you do a lot, and your staff behind the scenes to keep everything running, and that's appreciated.
We do have a good crew over there.
Yeah. On the clerk's salary, I noticed hourly job rate, I guess, of $18 and something.
1876, I think, is the job rate for our deputy clerks at this stage of the game, and that's what we're asking for is a deputy clerk. In case you don't know what a deputy clerk is in my world, deputy clerk can be me if I'm not there. So a deputy clerk can sign anything that needs to be certified, sign things that have to have a clerk's signature on them. In open court, we file things. They can. It's a difference in that in a clerk reception. Job is basically the clerk receptions are working the counters, that kind of thing. So deputy clerks can go to court and do things as if I was there for me.
And do you think we can attract the experience and caliber person that we need in there? I mean, McDonald's pays what, 14 or 15?
Yeah.
I mean, this is
the fight we have every year about this, or all the time about this. I will tell you that I commend the board. When I started as clerk, I think our deputies were making $12 an hour, and y'all have successfully brought our pay rates up to $18.76 for the job rate on that. and it's helping us to find more quality employees. Now, obviously, I think they should make $25 an hour, but I mean I think that's a good rate of pay for what we're trying to get in people, and we can hire decent employees that have a mindset towards longevity with us. Now we hit sometimes. We hit the rock, I guess you'd say, when we try to hire people, and sometimes we train people to go work for other agencies and attorneys, that kind of. But that's the conversation I have with them. We try to hire a decent person, and that's helping us get people that are decent enough to work, and we can train them from within. We also try to hire part-time. In the past we'd hired part-time and worked them, and then try to bring them up. Lately, we've got our part-time position in the file room down there, so it was kind of one of those things where we have to find somebody that we feel like is going to be a good clerk and has a little bit of experience in this world, and it's worked out good through the years. And I will say this pay rate, although it could always be higher, I think is a good stable rate for us to hire good clerks at.
Not asking for a name, but do you have somebody in your department that would be able to step up into this role and then fill their job?
I've got a file clerk right now that if she stays with us, I don't know, we might look elsewhere. I mean, right now, most of the people that I would have that are already deputies, and I don't have anybody within, I don't think, other than the file clerk that I would offer the job to if in fact she stays with us. Kind of hard to keep a file clerk too, so. Anybody else? Thank y'all for your consideration.
Great, thank y'all for coming. So, Alicia, I'll turn it back over to you now for the highlights.
So I'm gonna summarize the second court real quick, just so you understand the numbers that I've put before you. On the lead page there, we've got the positions that we would need to get the second court going. That would be a deputy clerk in the clerk of court that Mr. Lee just spoke about, and then in state court we would need to add a judge, a judicial assistant, and a staff attorney. The solicitor would need to add 2 assistant solicitors, 2 administrative assistants, and an investigator, and the sheriff would need to add 2 deputies. The next page shows you the cost of doing all that, and as we spoke about earlier, we feel like there would be cost recovery from the additional number of cases that would be closed to cover this cost. So that's, in summary, what we're talking about as far as cost is concerned, the number of heads that are concerned.
Cost recovery, Alicia, to just about equal the 1.1, or?
I think it may exceed that a little bit. But I'm pretty comfortable that it's going to be at that level once we start closing these additional cases and moving through the caseload.
Another thing this second state court will do is it will actually, through the addition of some of these employees, it's going to, in my opinion, bolster the efficiency of some of the departments. So for instance, in the solicitor's office, right now Solicitor Jackson is having to take on a certain amount of the cases herself. So now if you add another court, you're going to have administrative duties and other things that, as being the elected official, she needs to pay more attention to. They currently don't really have an investigator, if you will. So adding this investigator in second state court is actually going to help the first state court as well, which is going to help overall state court with efficiency and being able to produce justice, if you will, faster and hopefully more accurately. So the second state court does more than just the second state court. It actually helps the entire system. So that's just something I want to point out as well.
Okay, that'll conclude our discussion on the state court. So we'll move into the budget, and I'd like to start with the revenue. You received 2 packages related to the budget. One is labeled fiscal year 2025, and then it has highlights for revenue, and the other is the proposed general fund revenue budget. So I'm going to go down that kind of in summary, excuse me, and then if you have any questions, we can come back and look at individual I will look at individual items ultimately, but let me just kind of summarize everything, and then we can look at the individual numbers, especially in the areas where we've got some larger changes. There's a couple of things that we need to take into consideration on property taxes. The legislative body for the state of Georgia this year increased the homestead exemption from $2,000 to $4,000. So that will affect our property tax. I don't feel like it's going to have a big effect on it. I think it'll probably be around $150,000 to $200,000 in property tax. In the projection that I did, I assumed a 5% increase in market value, and I've spoke to the tax assessor about that assumption, and he felt like that was a fair percentage that he's seeing in actual market sales. So in doing that, then I took a look at what it would take to do a full rollback of the millage rate, and that's where I came up with the $29,950,000 in current year property tax. So those are the assumptions that I've made to get to that number in our property tax. And as y'all well know, that's the largest part of our revenue. Even though sales tax is coming on strong.
One question, Alicia.
Sure.
So the 29 whatever million is total property tax for next year?
Correct.
Okay. And that figure was 29,950.
And that's at about a 98% collection rate.
Okay.
Which is about where the tax commissioner averages. She does a great job of collecting property tax. So that also assumes that we're going to collect 100%, that we'll collect about 98%.
And that's with the full rollback?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Ms. Searcy, do we have any idea how this does it affect Carroll County differently since we have a floating homestead exemption? Does those numbers fluctuate differently?
My understanding, are you talking about the increase in the homestead exemption? I spoke to the tax assessor about that, and he said that it would still affect what we collect, because even if you have a homestead exemption, your original amount that makes up your tax base on your homesteaded property, the homestead will be applied to that instead of added to the floating amount.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
I know you understand the floating homestead better than I do probably, but it goes, so it applies on that first. So if you paid $100,000 for your house and it's now worth $300,000 and you've got a $200,000 float, it's going to come off of the $100,000.
Okay.
The initial amount that you paid for your property.
Basically coming off when it was locked in at that rate.
Correct.
Whatever
It's coming off the locked in amount.
Okay.
I'm going to move on down. We've got motor vehicle tax ad valorem. I'm just projecting that about where I see it coming in this year. Everything going all the way down to sales tax is pretty much based on where we're running this year. I do have a little bit of an increase projected for sales tax. I've got about a 2% increase in there. This year we're running about 10% higher than we did last year. Year before last, I think we were at about 7%, and the year before that, we were well above 10%. So our sales taxes continue to grow year over year over year. and I think at this point it's time to project a little bit of a increase in that sales tax amount instead of just trying to project what we thought we were going to collect from this year. I think that's been extremely conservative. And then on the insurance premium tax, we have seen increases in that year over year, and I've assumed a 2% increase over what we collected this year on that, which 2% is a lot lower than the gains that we've seen in the prior years. So still a conservative number, but also assuming that there will be some growth in that number too. The Forest Land Protection Act, we had a revaluation in that. That's not a real big number in our budget, but the number changed significantly, so I wanted to explain that. That market revaluation took us from about $11,000 to $12,000 a year in revenue to about $45,000 in revenue. So, and that was because the land value actually had a revaluation. In the number for Villa Rica, let's see, we're going to page 2 now on the proposed general fund revenue budget. For Villa Rica, you see a $200,000 number where we had not had a number in the past. That's the amount that Villa Rica will be paying us for the TAD. So that was the amount that we negotiated in the TAD agreement.
And that will increase each year for up till 5 years to $500,000. And then at that point, it may be even further if we go into service delivery strategy, not to muddy the waters, but there may be even more revenue. But we'll be guaranteed over the next 5 years to go up to $500,000 annually.
Correct. And I think the thought process behind that was to cover our additional cost of services in Villa Rica, probably primarily fire and animal services and sheriff. So that's what that was put into place for. In our intergovernmental revenue, we are doing paving jobs for the school system and for other municipalities. It's hard to project what they will ask us to do in the coming year, but we have typically done about $50,000 to $60,000 at a minimum. So I increased that revenue to $55,000, and then on the expenses, I also added in the asphalt cost to offset that revenue, and you'll see that as we go through the expense budget. But we're getting that money in, we're having to buy the asphalt. I needed to put the asphalt in the public works budget, so that's why we've got the increase there. The next big change is going to be in our CI inmate housing. The warden asked me to draw a letter up of our increased cost, and he and the other wardens in the state submitted it to the governor and to the Department of Corrections, I guess is the proper route that would have gone, and then ultimately to the legislator and to the governor, asking for a $2 a day per inmate increase in what the state funds us back for the CI. And last year that was turned down by the state, but they reapproached it this year, and the state has approved an increase of $2 a day per inmate. And you'll see as we get into the CI budget, a lot of our increase in cost is related to food. So that'll help offset the cost of our increases in food. We're housing about 233 inmates on average a month. Some months are higher than that, but that's about what we're averaging. So that's what I took into consideration to come up with the $2 million that the state will reimburse us on the CI housing. the recreation, their participation's up, and they also will submit a request to increase their fees. They are the lowest, they have the lowest participation cost in the county, and they're going to try to get more in line with the other departments. So I don't have that fee schedule at this point, but they're putting that together as we speak. Then the next line is what we've just been talking about, the state court fines, fees, and the civil costs for state court. Now we're over on page 3, about a third of the way down. And so you see a pretty large increase in state court fines from $1,320,000 to $2,363,000, and then on the civil side, going from $215,000 to $310,000, and that's taken into consideration that we'll be putting in that second state court. We also have a pretty good increase in our interest. Interest rates last year at this time, I think, were around 4%. We're pretty consistently averaging around 5.25% right now. Rates next spring may go down, but I think through the fall they're going to hold pretty steady, based on what I'm hearing. So I feel like we're going to have the opportunity to earn more interest on our rainy day fund that we have set aside. So that concludes the summary of revenue. If there's any questions about a specific line item, I'll be glad to try to answer those.
I just have a couple of questions related to the property tax and that type of revenue. So for the property tax increase, we say it's supported by market sales, and I can fathom that. That seems realistic. And simultaneously, though, we have in the building permits section, Alicia, 170,000 decrease in building permits, which seems contradictory to an increase in market sales. I mean, I know they're two different things, but are we expecting the new builds to go down?
I think new builds are slowing, but I think the price per unit is still supported because you don't have excess inventory sitting out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think market sales are holding steady, even though new builds have slowed down some. We haven't gone back to where we're not building anything. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we will have that new construction that'll ultimately hit the tax digest too. But yes, I do think the trend recently has been that building is slowing. It's not stopping, but it's slowing. But I think that with it slowing and with the lack of inventory, that market sales are still holding steady. Now, we're also talking about market sales really for 23 because it's the value as of January 1 of 24 will be what the tax bills are based on.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about building permits for July 1 of 2024 to June 30th of 25.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not really comparing, you're comparing this time frame to this time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, market sales are really already history. That's historical data at this point because they've already, every sale that could take place in 2023 has already taken place and been booked.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we're getting the 5% from. The building permits is what we project new builds to be for this fiscal coming up.
Okay. And the last question is just a technicality. So for property tax, we say a 5% increase, but then on the spreadsheet with the columns, the 1.85 seems to be about 6.5% more than the fiscal year '24 proposed. Is that right? Is it 6.5 or is it 5%? So,
Well, so I projected a 5% increase in the tax digest. And then
okay.
you've got, so then you've also got some new bills in there.
Okay. That's the difference.
And then you've got, I don't recall what I put the collection rate at last year, but I think I might have been a little more conservative than 98%. With the, I believe I was, because with the amount of the market value increase last year, I thought collections would be down due to all of the appeals. And so I think those appeals will be resolved, and we should, our collection rate, even though our collection rate's still good, I don't think a lot of people paid their property tax and under appeal.
Yeah.
So, they weren't trying to get out of paying it. They were just trying to pay less.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Cersei, on page 2, the $225,000 net change for current FY commission, what exactly?
I went by where we are this year,
Okay.
today.
Okay. I noticed it was kind of the same trend going, so I just didn't know if that was a anomaly or what.
And that's based on, the tax commissioner gets commission based on property tax collected in TVAT. So as those increase, then you'll see an increase in commission.
Okay.
All right, I have a question about the $200,000 that we're collecting from Villa Rica for the TAD. Okay, now, TADs are sort of a funny animal. So that 200,000, and Commissioner Chance, I know we negotiated it'll go up, but isn't that based on what is actually built in the TAD? Inside the area of the tax allocation district?
No, sir. So in the negotiations that we had with Villa Rica, one thing that I was adamant about for the county to even consider was the fact that they are taking in fire insurance premium tax money. That tax originated at the state level and used to fund the state level fire marshal and services. And then, like many other services, things are divvied down into the counties and the cities to do state work as well, if you will. And so Villa Rica was taking in at the time about $1.2 or $1.3 million in fire insurance premium tax money, and they were expending about $500,000 to Douglas County, and we weren't getting anything. Now, not beating up on Villa Rica, that was done during a service delivery strategy agreement, and that's what they agreed upon at the time. And so I said, technically, we should be getting the balance of that. And not only should we be getting the balance of it, it should go to whoever's providing fire service, which Carroll County is providing fire service. So much like your neighbor paying your bill for years and then all of a sudden you realize you should be paying it somewhere else, I understood that that money was going in their general fund and they maybe couldn't just overnight give us all that money that I felt like that they should be giving to us. So the agreement was that it would start out in year one $100,000, and that it would increase each annual year an additional $100,000 up to $500,000, with the understanding that in the future, Carroll County, if we do, at the chairman's direction, revisit service delivery, that we may even ask for more, but that we would apply the $500,000. So at some point, if we say Villa Rica should be paying us $800,000 in that original agreement, we would get the $500,000, and then they'd pay us the extra $300,000. I know that's a long-winded answer, but I was just trying to give you the history of how that was arrived to.
I couldn't remember how we arrived at that figure. You jogged my memory when you started all that. It was through the fire service insurance. I understand it. I just don't want to get down. I didn't want to get down the road and go, oops.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. So if you're ready, we'll move on to the expense part of the budget. We'll just go through each department like we've done in the past, just starting kind of how it's laid out in our financial statements by department, with the commission office being the first part of it. Let me just state a couple of things that you're going to see pretty consistently throughout all of the departments. The postage rates are going up, so you're going to see postal increases. Office supplies have continued to increase. Our telephone system the telephone system that was at College Street in the sheriff's office, the CI, and Public Works, we owned that system at one point, and it went down, and we had to replace it. And so now we're on a hosted telephone system, which increases. We didn't have to buy a telephone system, but we do have to pay hosting fees each month. So our telephone cost has gone up because we're paying those hosting fees. So you'll see some increases in the telephone expense. And probably the most important part of the budget, I didn't make a note here, but proposed in the budget is an employee increase amount of $1.50 an hour. And this is a little bit different than how we've done it in the past, so you may have some questions, but I would like to propose, and the chairman would like to propose, doing $1.50 an hour up to $30 an hour. And then everybody over $30 an hour would get 5%. So at $30 an hour, 5% is $1.50. And then what's happened is you've got the lower people who have gotten more per hour, and the top people as a percentage have not gotten as much of an increase. So this kind of levels the incremental pay raises across the board. You were getting some compression in your middle and upper management that was. And that's why it was structured this way, is to try to help offset that some. So we can talk about that if you have questions about it.
And that's above 30 an hour would get 5%?
Correct.
And the 30 below would be, what'd you say?
$1.50 an hour.
But it was our unanimous intent to structure prior pay raises so that lower paid employees would get the increase.
Right, and it still has that effect, because somebody making $20 an hour gets more than 5%.
Yeah.
So my question is, and it's just philosophical based off how we're doing it different this year, and I guess I have a legal question as well that may not can be answered in the moment, I don't know, but are we classifying this, is this a part of a cost of living raise? Because in our enabling legislation, we have some other things that are affected by how we give our own employees. So now if we're going to be doing percentages and we're going to be doing dollar amounts, is that going to have any confliction with some of the language, or is there a standard that we just automatically average something? I'm not saying I'm against it, I'm just trying to see, is it going to affect other things that we need to think about?
I believe it would all be considered a cost of living raise. It's just, in the past, for many, many years, cost of living raises was done as a percentage. In the past couple of years, it's been done as an amount, like the dollar per hour amount. And that's followed the state's lead on that, kind of how the state has structured it too, where they did a percentage and then they've done a flat amount more recently. But just because it's a hybrid, I think it would still be classified as a cost of living adjustment.
But I guess my question is, we have other things in the enabling legislation that are stated off of what we are doing. So my point is, you've got two different mechanisms that you're both considering to be cost of living. And so I'm wondering how that is going to affect the others, because now you've got one more mix to have to figure out in calculations. So, and that may not concern you. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it would be applied for the other things the same way it's being applied here, where it's the $1.50 if it's under $30 per hour and 5% for over $30 per hour. So I think it would follow, anything tied to it would follow that same formula if the commission approved that formula.
Okay, thank you.
So, in the Board of Commissioners budget, that pay increase was, I think the thought and then it would in fact increase the job rates. So the clerk we were talking about a while ago that was making 1876, I think would now go to 20 or something like that, 2025, something like that. So that's where those deputy clerks would now be, which I think if you look outside, attorneys are still paying considerably more than that for those same kind of workers. So the other reason this dollar amount came up was because this will put our deputy sheriffs pretty well in line with the Carrollton City Police. And that was part of the objective, was to get our public safety workers closer to their competitors in the municipalities. So that was kind of where we came to with those numbers and how we got to where we got to. The biggest change in the commission budget is going to be for the district commissioner pay. In last year, I set the budget based on a calculation that was inaccurate, and when we went and recalculated that, we had to do a 35% increase for FY24, and then there would be an 11% increase for FY25. And I took into account the dollar amount, so $1.50 would be approximately $3,000 a year. So that would be the increase in the district commissioner pay for 2025. And then I went back and recalculated, or took the calculations from Mr. Jackson and our outside attorney to get the 24 numbers. So that's why there's a pretty good size increase in that. It's really taken into consideration the 24 and the 25 numbers.
And this is what has been going on for nearly a year now, I guess, this debacle and trying to decide. But it's based on, as I understand it, it wasn't requested by district commissioners as worded here. It was as mandated by state law and or our county charter. Is that correct, Maverick?
Yes, that's correct. It'd be what's required by state law and the charter.
Okay.
And you said for this 24 period, then the 35% increase is how much it relate to? Number-wise, dollar-wise? Do you know? I don't know.
25, I thought she said 3,000.
Well, 3,000 for the 11%. So that would be about 6,000 for the 24 amount. I'm sorry, I don't have that number
That's
off
fine.
the top of my head.
Here, so I'm just trying to...
But I can get it. I can get it to you.
This will be on the agenda for May as a separate vote for y'all to decide, because I think as you're referring to, Clint, there's been different ways of doing it, and you just got to decide as a group which way you want to do it and what dollar amount goes with it. So Alicia did budget, I believe, for the highest amount if you chose that, but this will be on the May agenda, so there'll be more details to follow.
Maybe that'll get 14 people to run for my position instead of just 7 now. Overall, Alicia, what is if we just isolate employee salaries and just look at that as one overall line item of increase for the budget, what is the percentage increase in employee salaries compared to our current fiscal year?
I haven't looked at that number as a whole, and I can, but I would, off the top of my head, say about 7%.
Okay. Man, I'm total fine with that. I just wanted to know what we were looking at, big picture.
I can go back and recalculate that and just make sure.
I know, see, we've talked about it several times, but it seems like that was, I thought 6.5 or 7.
Okay. In the elections department, there will be fewer elections next year, even though we will be hit with a special election for Public Service Commission that we didn't realize initially, but we feel like our elections expense will cover that. The current election supervisor has requested a change from a part-time person to a full-time person, and that's the person who takes care of all of the elections equipment. Mr. Rigby had made this request in the past, and it seems as though the new elections equipment, I say new, it's been in place now for a few years, but the Dominion equipment requires a lot of maintenance between software downloads, charging. You actually have to put the devices together sometimes to do the downloads, and so all of that takes a lot more time than we initially realized it would. So we're asking for a change from part-time to full-time for that position in elections. And other than that, in the regular pay increase, everything else is decreasing.
And that department is something, I mean, every department can have something hidden they're not going to be aware of, but we don't know if someone's going to pass, someone's going to retire, someone's going to retire and open up a position, and someone moves from one to another to run for another. So there's always, something subject to change in this particular budget that I'm not saying I'm not worried about it, but in other words, they can't help that.
That's right. And we had that same scenario this year. Fortunately, we had enough in our election expense to cover it, but you're right, we don't know. County General Administration, we got the pay increases, then we have an increase, our annual increase to Tyler Technology for our Munis HR and financial system. The utilities at 997, just because we've got a lot more square footage over there, have increased significantly. So we're going to ask for an increase for the utilities to cover that. And then our payments to others, that is excise tax. And I didn't bring it out in the revenue discussion, but excise tax is running behind where it ran last year. So I've reduced the amount of revenue, and then I've reduced the payments to others, or the municipality part of that excise tax. So that's what we pay out to the cities. So I've reduced that to equal what the reduction in revenue, or their percentage of the reduction in revenue. The law budget has not changed any. The IT budget They're asking for another product called Armis. It addresses, and I'm getting way out of my area of comfort here because this is really technical stuff, but it's a product that goes out on our network and looks for devices and confirms whether they should or should not be on our network. And we have been testing this and have found a lot of devices attached to our network. Things that I never thought of. Security cameras now connect to your network. And if they're not properly protected, password protected, and have the proper things in place, harmful people can come in through those connections and damage our data or attack our data. So this product's already probably paid for itself just through the testing period, but Jacob wants to put it in as a permanent part of our IT resources. And then we've seen an increase in our Barracuda, which is our our email protection. And then he wants to add an MDM product.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was good this way too.
Risk management. I do not have any final numbers on our liability and auto coverage. These are projections. Based on discussion with Marsh McClellan on where they're seeing industry standards, I projected an increase of about 20%. We have had an excellent claim year so far. We've had some wrecks. We've had, some other things that have gone on, but all in all, this has been a great year so far. And I know we got a few more months left to go, but we're still projecting an increase just based on how the insurance market is right now. And I got about a 25% increase on my insurance. I hadn't had a wreck. I hadn't added a vehicle. Hadn't changed vehicles. Got the same cars I've had for the last 10 years. And I get a 25% increase in my insurance. It's just mind-boggling.
You're paying for that crash to cash.
Yep.
Yeah.
Commercial.
Yeah,
That
that's
was
right.
Paul Smith on the ball. That's about a 15% increase overall in that risk management budget, right? Yeah.
Yeah, probably close to it.
Yeah, seems reasonable. I'm glad they did a little bit at the state about tort reform anyway, thanks to the governor.
The tax commissioner, as I talked about earlier, we're looking at a postage increase there just based on the volume of things that she's required to mail out. And then her telephone system obviously went to a hosted system, and she's got office supply increases. So all things that were expected.
There's a huge issue going on right now with the Postal Service in general, and they had this almost as an agenda item for the city of Villa Rica last month, where they had to postpone 4 or 5 different rezonings because of a couple different things. But one of them is they had sent out certified mail and stuff was arriving 3 weeks later. And so they're in a quandary because that stuff is so expensive to send. I mean, it's $8 or $9, $10 just for one letter sometimes with all the services added. So then you're in the quandary of, do they reimburse that? Do you have to resend it again? If you do, and they're not willing to pay for it, then you've got double the budget. There's a lot of issues that I think are going to affect the county as well.
Well, we've seen it in the finance department just with vendors getting checks. And at this point, I think we probably have 20% of our vendors that are on ACH now. And we're asking for more and more. And our system supports that. Our financial system supports that. And so A lot of people still don't want to give you their bank account information, but if they do, they're guaranteed they get their money. And if they don't, it may be 6 weeks before they get their check.
Right.
Tax assessor, they're changing things up a little bit. He had unfunded some positions and hired a contractor to do some of his property tax work, and that didn't work out the way he wanted it, so he's wanting to move those positions back and refund those. So you're seeing money out of that contractual services line. You're seeing $162,000 coming out of that. That moves back into your salary and benefits lines, and then the pay increase. And then they also have to send out the assessment notices, which is an increase in their postage. And then they've got, they were actually adding an employee to their GAAO and GAP group memberships with a little bit of an increase there. And then in contractual services, they're upgrading one of their systems and doing a scanning project there too.
So really, you've only got a $2,700 really net increase if you figure it that way, because of how he's adjusting, like you said, the other that he was contracting out.
Right.
So overall, about an 11% increase for the tax assessor. And do you think, or does Hubert think that this will, I mean, he's had a real problem from what I understand about being able to attract candidates that are willing to go through the grueling training and stick with that, and then stick with the position afterwards. And it seems to be a real problem based on our current rate of pay. I mean, I would support a rate of pay that would attempt to alleviate that. And is that reflected here as far as?
I had a conversation with him about it, and he's discussed it with his board chairman, Mr. Fulford, and that they are willing to try at this rate to see if they can retain and hire new employees. We're still a pretty good distance away from Paulding County and Coweta County and Douglas County. It's just hard for us to compete with their pay rates.
Well, that's another dilemma, because he can't attract folks that are already certified from other counties because of the pay. So when you lose somebody, you can't hire any experienced help or someone who's even at the basic certification level. I'm just saying his office is a little bit different from most of our other county offices, just because of the Department of Revenue required certification, and it's such a long process, and a lot of candidates just aren't willing for that, and then you can't hire somebody that already has that either, because you can't attract them, so it becomes a real problem.
They initially came, or I think the chairman may be able to speak better on this, but I believe Mr. Fulford called you and had a discussion, and this was pretty close to what he initially asked for before we ever tried to decide what we were going to do as far as a raise. So that was, I think that probably played into the amount of the raise, between public safety and the tax assessor's office, probably played into it a good bit. So I hope that it will. It's, you put more money in the bucket, and last year we thought it would help, and I think it did a little bit. I think we got at least one additional person, but it sure hadn't solved the situation. So I think it would give his people probably an 8 or 9% increase somewhere. The lower level assessors. I think the upper level assessors are pretty good. I think it's the lower levels that he's having a hard time filling.
Yeah, and without filling those, you might as well not even talk about succession planning, because, if you can't fill those, folks don't stick around. You have to increase, again, the required state level certifications go from a certified 1 to 2 to 3, whatever. If you can't even get the 1, you can't hope for a 3, so.
Well, and the 3s and 4s have been there a long time.
Yeah.
I would think that there would have to be some kind of headway moving forward, and I haven't had an extensive conversation with Mr. Sparks, but if he is taking, one of the original reasons of why we had some contract labor was for this very issue of trying to fill the gaps of an employee basis or revolving door. So if he is doing away with some of those contractual services and trying to bring employees back in-house, I would assume he's done some type of research to feel like he's going to be able to fill those positions. Now, Commissioner Reynolds brings up a very valid point, but I'm just saying in his budget, in his request, he's actually flipping a model that he had brought to us a couple of years ago. So just reading between the lines, it would have to give me some sort of confidence that he believes he's going to be able to fill the positions. But here again, I haven't had those conversations with him.
Well, those are my same concerns, but I trust that he's probably got that in order. He's got to think he's going to be able to get those people, or he wouldn't be asking to do that, I think.
Yeah, and it could be a situation where you think that it's going to work and you try it and it might not. He may come back and say, I got to do something else. But I can work with him if we need to. If we're not filling positions and we just can't get them filled, and he feels like he needs more money, I think there's some things within his budget we may be able to do. Maybe not fund one position and fund some of the other positions at a little higher rate if we need to. I think he would rather have 4 good people and have 1 unfunded than to have 5 vacancies. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some things we can do to work with him if he gets to a point where he still just can't hire anybody.
And the changeover from contractual to employees, the funds aren't going away, so they're there if he has to do something different.
That's right. Moving to Superior Court, Judge Simpson has asked for a $200 a month increase in the judicial assistance supplement. That hadn't changed since I've been here. I didn't go back to look and see how long it's been, but I've been here 7 years and it hadn't changed. So he was asking for an increase there. And as y'all know, the circuit split, it will be happening on January 1 of 2025. We're not 100% sure of all of the impact of that at this point, but we do feel like that the supplements for the 4 judges that will stay in the West Georgia circuit will become 90% of our responsibility, because if we're in a circuit with Heard, Heard's volume is just so low that the judges are going to be spending most of their time here working on cases in Carroll County. So we will become responsible for, we project, 90% of the judge's salary supplement that we've paid in the past.
Which we increased to $50,000, which I think was the state maximum. But the $50,000 was, to your point, was not our full responsibility. It was divided in 5 counties.
That's right. Now, we were paying our portion of 8 judges. So the 4 judges that will not be in our circuit will no longer be our responsibility, but our percentage will go up. So that's why you don't see a large increase. We were at 188 and we're going to 220. But we do take on almost the full responsibility of the 4 judges that will stay here. Then the court reporters, we increased that just because court reporters are hard to come by, and we just got more and more trials, so we needed to just put more money in that line to try to retain these court reporters. And in our other court cost, we increased that by $2,500 for translators for mental health court. We're seeing more non-English speaking people in the court system, so we're having to get translators to help with that. In the clerk of court, we've got the additional deputy clerk that we talked about for the second state court. And other than that, that's in the regular increases that we talked about. There's no change in the district attorney's budget because we don't know what the impact of the circuit split is going to be at this point. And we will be getting a new district attorney. Mr. Cranford will be going into staying in the Coweta circuit, so we will be getting a new district attorney at this point. I read through the state budget. It looked like the intention of the state was to more equally fund the district attorney's office and the public defender's office, and it looks like to me that the state's going to fund 4 district attorneys plus the chief district attorney, and the same thing in the public defender's office. If that's the case, then I think that we have enough funding in here to fund the additional people that we would need in the district attorney's office, but I don't know what funding they're going to do for administrative assistants and investigators and support staff. So until we figure all that out, it's really hard to determine what a budget's going to be for the district attorney and the public defender. So we've left both of those the same, hoping that we would have enough funding in here to cover the needs at least through the last half of the year, and then next year come back with a budget where we know what we're dealing with.
We're also going to increase, though, on the revenue side that by that same percentage, I would assume, if we're going to get $2 million for a circuit. To your point, it's going to be fluctuating, but I think on the revenue side, we ought to be doing well.
Where are you talking about?
Well, in other words, we're a whole new circuit, and I think there's approximately $2 million that is applied to the circuit, I'm sure in different ways and applied in different categories. And while granted, we're going to have more of an expense side, right? We're not going to be sharing a district attorney with but I'm saying I think that's going to be balanced out by the greater percentage that we would receive on the revenue side for being a new circuit.
We should get more cases through the court too, which saves on the jail side.
That's
fines.
That's going to be the biggest impact, I think, is that we should see justice served a lot quicker. Then on the state court, we pretty much talked about all this. We've got the additional judge, the staff attorney, judicial assistant, and a supplement in there for the chief judge of $10,000. And that was a number that Clint, myself, and Avery kind of talked about for having a senior judge or a chief judge over that court and the additional administrative responsibilities that they take on to actually compensate them a little bit for that. And then we've got additional court reporter fees to go. 3B would be the second court. And then the increase in the public defender or court-appointed attorneys to help process the additional number of cases that they're going to put through there. And then We added a cell phone for the court coordinator. That's a part-time position, but they come in on the day of court, and they're having to call people who are supposed to be in court, or they're doing a lot of coordinating, and they needed a cell phone to be able to handle that. So we've added that in. And then the contractual services, we added in an associate judge for 3B until we can get the full-time judge in place. So that'll be somebody that'll come in and help in 3B until we get that full-time judge in place. The solicitor's office, we added the 2 solicitors, the 2 administrative assistants, and an investigator, and then the benefits associated with adding those people. In magistrate, we added the contractual services for the e-warrant system. I should have taken that associate magistrates out. That didn't change, so that I left that in there from last year, and that needs to just go away. In the probate court, we're asking to move 1 part-time person to a full-time person. She would like to add Central Voice, which is a voice software that she can use for calling people into court and doing some of the things she needs to do with getting people in and out of court. And then her postage is going up, and she's doing additional certified mail just to try to make sure that her mail gets to where it's supposed to go. And then she asked for an increase to pay the county conservator. Juvenile court, this will change some too, and we will actually probably see a change in revenue on this. This is a circuit-wide judge. Coweta has been covering Heard in the past. Now that Coweta is part of another circuit, Judge Palmer will be responsible for covering Heard County. And he feels like we will need an associate judge to help with the additional number of cases. So he's got some training cost and some increases there for the number of cases in the contractual services line to pay an associate judge. We will get we get reimbursed a part of Judge Palmer's salary right now. That percentage will go up. I don't know how much at this point, but he feels like it'll be enough to offset these additional costs that he's asked for the judge to help with cases either here or in Heard County. Public defender, I've left that budget the same until we find out what the state funding is on that.
Something went up $3 with no changes.
I think I rounded something to make.
Okay.
I didn't like the odd number.
I'm not going to sweat the $3. I just saw it.
The sheriff's office, we're adding the 2 deputies for court services in state court. Their medical expenses continue to increase. The jail population has actually, the average jail population has moved from about 450 inmates up to 475. So they're having to feed on average about another 25. Then they're having to give medical services to those additional people also. In the K-9 program, they've added 1 K-9, and the food for the dogs have increased too, so we've got an increase there. On the telephone, they're asking to move the MiFi for the CADs that are in the cars are now being paid for out of the drug fund. They're asking for us to help with the funding on that some. And then they've got an increase in their office supply expense. And then the food and kitchen supplies have increased significantly between the increase in population and the increase in food cost. The Correctional Institute, they've seen an increase in utility cost and an increase in food cost. So they're doing everything they can to keep their food costs down, but they're even supplementing some things. But the state requires them, and I'm sure they require the jail too, to have a balanced meal every day. So there's some things they can't supplement, but other than wages, that was their only two increases.
Ms. Cersei, do you know if on some of these older buildings, if I know our maintenance department does a great job, and I understand that fees are going up from electric companies, but I wonder, have we done a thorough job of going through making sure like everything's LED bulbs? I'm just trying to do anything to offset. I know those places run 24/7, and maybe they have. I'm just trying to think if we're doing our part to help offset those additional, costs.
I'm not sure. I know at the prison that they have put automatic shutoffs on the showers as far as water is concerned. They have the automatic shutoffs to go on the sinks. They have not installed those yet. And we have done some work on the air conditioning system out there to help with efficiencies. As far as the lights, I don't know. I know in the buildings that Jesus is responsible for, every time a bulb goes out, he replaces it with LED. So he's proactive in doing that. I'm not sure about it, the CI and the sheriff's office, but I would think the sheriff's office is probably doing the same thing. The fire department, they asked for a lot, and we kind of narrowed it down and negotiated to what they really thought they had to have. They're continuing to implement software to help with the management of the fire department, and so they've asked for a upgrade on their Fire Studio software. Right now, all their officers just have email, and they want to be able to do Teams meetings and have Word and Excel available to their officers. So they're asking for an upgrade in their Microsoft Office package just for their officers. The regular firefighters will stay with just an email account. And then they're asking for some new software from Allison Transmissions and Cummins Engines to go in the repair shop to help with diagnosis on those. Then they've asked to get a contract on their overhead doors for the maintenance on the overhead doors. I think that overhead doors must be problematic, and so they want to keep them maintained so that they don't have as many problems with them. In the vehicle repair and maintenance line, they asked for an increase due to the increase in parts cost. And then travel, they've asked for an increase to add 2 new conferences that they would like to go to, an arson conference and a fire safety conference. And then in dues and subscriptions, they've asked for a National Fire Code subscription. And then in the training, they want the registration fees for the arson and fire safety conferences. In the supplies non-office, they've had an increase in cleaning supplies and probably when we get that new station open, that's going to even impact that even more. In utilities, we've seen an increase there. Uniforms and supplies, they're wanting to order some replacement jackets, hats, and t-shirts. They're just getting some wear and tear on those items. And in the dive team, they're wanting to increase the cost of their regulator testing to go to an annual test on those. And then the EMS supplies, they're just, with the increased number of calls, they're using more, and the cost of the items have increased.
Ms. Cersei, have we, did they go through and do an analysis on the new fire station number 9 and try to do any estimates? I mean, while one way we're going to be a lot more efficient, we're also going to have, air conditioning units in each one of the bedrooms, a lot of different components that are going to be moving there. So I'm seeing utilities at $15,000, and I'm wondering if that's just going to cover all the existing increases, not counting,
You're probably accurate. I don't think that takes Station 9 into consideration, but we can go back and take a look at that again.
Okay. And as far as the training in general, I know before when we did, I guess, a county-wide training for the fire department, I can't remember if we took that out of SPOS funds or we took it out of the general, or if we reimbursed one or the other, but I'm not doing the chief's job for him. I'm just trying to think outside. It sounds like some of these are specific trainings for specific purposes, but is there anything that we need to be thinking about, county-wide that we're not included, or have they asked for that?
I think ultimately, when we get the EVOC built, they would like a burn building out there for more inclusive training that they can have available to them at all times. And so I think in the capital expenditures, that would be something we would need to look at long term. I think what they're doing now is probably as much as they can do with the facilities that they have available to them. They're doing some in-house training with software and that kind of stuff, and then they're doing some classroom training. I know they did some at Public Works, and so they're doing those kind of trainings, but actual hands-on training, I think their ultimate goal would be to have a burn building that's available to them all the time where they could do their classes there.
And one thing in Station 9 is we're calling it the tower. It's basically built into the facility itself that they're going to be able to train off of the back of. Now, obviously, that won't be an example of burning, but I think that's the model going forward, is trying to include more in the actual station where they're at. Then if they get a call, they've not had to have, another group that's had to supplement them responding, or they can come right down from the tower and then be to wherever they need to be off of a call. So I'm proud of that component, I guess, that was built into 9 to help alleviate some of the need of having to go somewhere else to train for a specific type of, evacuation or whatever they're doing out of a building.
I think they're planning for Commissioner Chance to do that first rappel at the opening.
I have to check with the legal counsel on our insurance. If
Yeah,
I'm
that could be a
covered
risk
there.
management issue.
Oh, yes.
The EMS medical services, this is taken into consideration the approval of the additional unit and the cost, the CPI index increase for 2025 and the $50,000 per year that we agreed to in the contract. The coroner asked for a little bit extra in the telephone expense just because fees have gone up, and he's got a deputy coroner, I think, that's working more than had been in the past. Animal services, she's asking for an additional animal control officer. She's I think right now fully staffed, and they're still not able to meet all of the demand of all the calls that they have on a daily or weekly basis. And then she's asking for some additional low-cost spay-neuter. That will be offset by donations. So the additional cost for those low-cost spay-neuter that they're doing, I think almost monthly now, and the number of animals that they're spaying and neutering is mind-boggling. I mean, they are really doing a great job of getting spay and neuter out there and getting them into areas where people can't or won't pay for spay and neuter, and the donations have come in to offset those costs. So you see an increase in expense here, but there was contribution increase on the revenue side too. Their older truck is just needing more repairs, so she's asked for an increase in the vehicle repair and maintenance line, increase in cleaning supply cost, utility cost, and then additional gas and oil if they put another truck on the road for an additional officer.
So when you say animal control training officer, are you saying that person is going to have a dual duty? They're going to do that and be out on the road? Or are you saying, okay.
Yes, I think her goal would be to get somebody. She has one person that went to Gypstick and got certified through the sheriff's office. And I think her goal would be to get another animal control officer that can go through that same training process. And then those two people would be responsible for training the other two to make sure that they're doing things the way they should. And then you would have two officers that could actually write tickets and make it stick and take it to court instead of having to call a deputy out there and get them to write a ticket. The animal control officer could take care of everything in addition to doing some training with the other officers.
And so if this is approved, then you're going to allocate a new vehicle down the road out of SPLOST? I mean, I see you got the expenditure for upkeep or the running.
I've got a capital projects request list here,
okay.
So we'll take a look at that. But yes, that is in the capital request, is to add another vehicle. That's correct.
How much, Alicia, of the 125 is for the new position versus the typical raise?
Just in the salary line, about 40,000, 45,000.
And I would like to say we had an incident in my district with people were losing livestock, and it all came down to one dog, and they had a deputy with them when they finally went to get the dog, and it sure made things a lot easier having that deputy in the truck with the animal control officer.
They're pretty powerless unless they have
when they got a deputy with them, they're not.
Right, but these two will now be mandated like a deputy, so it won't take two employees. It'll take just the one mandated animal control officer.
Okay.
So right now we're relying on having a deputy ride with the animal control or show up, which takes them out of doing something else. So the idea is to get these animal control officers mandated, so when they go to get that dog, you don't have to have that deputy with you.
Okay, so this deputy was, well, the way he described it to me, he was permanently attached to animal control.
Right now, because we don't have that ability to write tickets on our own.
Okay.
So I think the one guy's already mandated. He's already passed the classes. But yeah, the idea is to free up that deputy to continue to do other work that we need them to do.
Instead of being with the animal control.
Yes. So you take it from 2 employees down to 1 who's mandated by the sheriff's office, gone to the classes, gotten mandated by the sheriff so they can go pick up that dog and write the ticket at the same time.
And the sheriff has to approve this person up
Yes.
front. They can't, animal control can't just go hire somebody and say, okay, you're going to mandate school. The sheriff has to be involved in that process.
They did the interviewing of all this person we just recently got through the school, so.
And what are we doing, Alicia? Because I don't get calls or contacts, whatever, every month, but I would say I get enough to still know that the public isn't entirely satisfied with animal control response, I guess, especially, and I haven't really analyzed my messages, but on weekends and that kind of thing, what kind of coverage do we have and so on? Because it just seems like there's still a lingering problem with response and action that the public at least is satisfied with.
Well, right now, on the weekends, you've got somebody on call. So,
But what does that mean? I mean,
well, that means that they're at their home or out shopping or somewhere in Carroll County, and a call comes in to 911.
suppose, and I saw this on Facebook, Steve, so I know what you're talking about. And the same thing happened to us about 3 or 4 years ago. 2 crazy dogs from a neighbor that had moved off and vacated them and left them tied up there until they got loose came over and killed probably 10 or 12 of our goats. At that time we were raising them, and just wreaked havoc. And anyway, my question, if this had happened on a weekend and a call comes in, oh my goodness, here's a dog or 2 that are out in the pasture killing livestock, what would have happened?
Well, let's just say that the animal control officer lives on the north side of Carrollton, and it happens in Lowell. The call comes into 911. 911 has to contact that officer. The officer has to get prepared to go on the call. I mean, I don't know what, whatever they're doing at home, they have to get in the truck, and they have to drive to Lowell to make the call. And yes, that's going to take extra time. If they're on duty, they're going to respond to a call a whole lot faster than when they're on call. If they're on duty, they're going to respond a lot faster than on call, because when they're on call, it's going to take them a minute or 2 to get ready and get in the truck and get moving. Also, during the week, you've got people out and about, so you might have one officer in Clem. They're going to make it to Lowell a lot faster than somebody that's in the north side of Carrollton. So, until you can get adequate staffing, and staffing through the weekend, response time is going to continue to be slower.
Well, one situation that I recall is just, and slow response time is one thing, and no response over the weekend is quite another. And I know there was an incident like in my district where someone complained of the dog being left there and eventually bit somebody and that kind of thing, but there was no response over the weekend, although originally the call had come in like on a Thursday. Anyway, basically there wasn't any response until Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week. By that time the dog had bitten somebody and so on. So when is it that animal control on the weekends decides to, or this person that is on call, so to speak, is actually called, or is called and doesn't feel the need to respond? That's kind of the question I have, is like operationally.
That's an operational question for animal services. I can't answer that. I just don't know enough about the process, and 911. I don't know what 911's instruction is, or what animal services. I don't know what
'Cause it's-
choose to make that decision.
Yeah, there's just a difference, I mean, as we can all fathom, from, oh, there's a dog tied up and I don't think they have enough food or whatever, to, hey, there's a dog out killing livestock, or there's a dog out that might bite somebody, he's very aggressive, blah, 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 and nothing is done over the weekend. That's what I'd like to see resolved, and if there is in fact a person on call, then the person should be called and should actually respond, as I guess.
Well,
where I'm headed.
I think with the addition of this person, we should improve our weekend coverage. That should help with that situation, so.
And another thing, when we think about, and I've had, some issues on my end as well with a lot of different calls, and they're complex. But I think one of the things is we think of animal control, and we put that under one umbrella, and it is. But if you look at us, we've done a lot on the animal adoption side. We've done a lot where they're having to house the animals. We've done a lot where they're having to do spay and neuter and bringing in additional vets and things. And so I think this is a step in the right direction to help on the initial call. It's kind of like when you call 911, you may want that person to ultimately be prosecuted that's doing a crime, but in the moment, you want the sheriff's department there as quick as they can to alleviate the situation, which I think is what Commissioner Reynolds is saying, is at the end of the day, when we get a call, they may care, what happens down the road, but the reality is what they're most concerned about is in the moment. And so I think this is a step in the right direction, is that we have spent a lot on housing and a lot of the other parts of the animal services that we need to be directing more to when they get that phone call, can somebody get out there as quick as possible?
I have a note from Christy here that our animal control calls increased by 500 from last year to this year. And I will say, you were talking earlier about how Mr. Sparks is trying to do some creative things, trying to change things that aren't working and trying to do something different. I have to say, Christy Owens is probably an expert at trying new things. She's always trying to see if this isn't working. We've given it time and it's not working. What else can we possibly do? She's been in contact with other animal control, animal shelter services. I mean, this is not just a Carroll County problem. This is across the United States. Getting this animal control officer mandated, getting another one. She'd like to explore some ideas, maybe doing a 12-hour rotation instead of, just trying to change up the hours, trying to change up different ideas. So I give her that. She comes in, all the time and going, okay, this idea I tried, it's not working. How about if I try this? So I give the animal services employees the credit of trying new stuff all the time. Other than trying to put more people on the road, which this will help, putting one more person out there, it still goes back on the citizens sometimes that we just don't have any control over. If somebody just is not keeping their dog or their animal under control, you could have 1,000 animal control officers and you're still going to end up with some stuff that citizens, they said they did 300 spayed and neutered last year. They're working almost towards 500 this year, but you go back and you look at still the number of owner surrenders, you look at the number of strays that continue to increase. All this is nationally trended, and I don't have answers. She doesn't have answers, but I will give that whole group out there full credit for trying to attempt new things. So Steve's already mentioned it. If there's no other, we could discuss this for hours. If y'all are good at a stopping point, I know we only have a few more departments, but we've been doing it for almost 2 hours. Maybe we take a quick 10-minute break and be right back at, maybe 7 minutes, and be right back at 11 o'clock to either if you want to continue the conversation or we can move on to Public Works. So are y'all in agreement to take a 7-minute quick break? Okay, we'll resume our budget work session. We'll move straight into public works at this time.
I have one more question facility-wise on animal services, because I heard about, overrun and that kind of thing out there. Do we have, I'm, a year ago I had a lot of interaction with Christy, and yes, she is innovative and tries to do what she can, I know, but, as far as the facilities, aside from personnel, are we okay?
I'm going by
Or is it just totally overloaded out there? I haven't been there
I'm going by this cheat list.
recently.
Break out the phone.
I think we stay at maximum capacity, and I think if we built
Yeah, let me go back to that.
another building, it'd be full,
Yeah.
and if we built another building, it'd probably be full too.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay.
So this is a big challenge,
Yeah.
for sure.
A note I have from Christy on that, she said she does not believe a bigger shelter is the answer. She says the more room we build, the more they'll come. What her biggest thing is there again is doing the spade and neuter and continuing to do the trap, neuter, release of cats, and continuing the adoption. And I'll just throw in something here. The Morgan Oil Company has just become the owners of 2 cats in our warehouse, and there was a big article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution this week about having warehouse cats in businesses that have been, of course, spayed and neutered, and taking care of critters and other things in that building. So I think it's just continuing to educate the public and doing the spade and neuter, not only us doing it, but making sure citizens do the spay and neuter, so we don't end up with all the kittens twice a year, that the homeowner once again, or the citizen, the pet owner is responsible on that end. So no, not building a new facility is not on her list.
Yeah, I wouldn't talk about building a new facility, but do we have the adequate contracts with vets and that kind of thing to conduct adequate level of spay and neuter and so on?
We do, as far as the number of staff that we have available to assist them. So for all of the things that we're doing right now, we've just about maxed our staff out.
Mm-hmm.
As to what we can do, but they're, I don't know how many hours a week Christy works, but she's working a lot more than 40. And
I'm just talking about with veterinarians to actually conduct.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you got a veterinarian that can do X amount of surgeries. Well, they're doing as many as they can with the staff that they have to assist them. The only way we could have more veterinary services is to have more staff.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of her future ideas and plans is to possibly have a veterinarian on staff instead of us contracting out. That would be something she would like to move. The other is to actually have another x-ray machine. I think she's looking at some options of having that funded. So there is, like I said, probably one of the most creative department heads trying to always look for solutions. So there's more to come on that one. And I know Tommy and Clint pointed out to me we have missed a few departments. It was, I'm going from the cheat sheet here too, but also because some of them had no changes. So, but there's one we left off that you wanted to talk about.
Oh,
Okay. So that's, I'm working on the change sheet.
I just thought maybe you didn't have a copy.
No, sorry.
Okay.
All right, so Alicia, we are on Public Works, I believe.
Well, we didn't get emergency management.
Right, that's it, because I'm going, like I said, I'm going on my sheet list right here. So
There's not,
no change.
there's no big changes there other than some phone expense that we broke out from, that was being covered by 911, and we've allocated that to EMA now. Public Works, they've asked for equipment repair and maintenance cost. They've got some older equipment now that they're having to maintain, and there again, parts have gone up some. A slight increase in their utility cost, and then the asphalt, the $55,000 that we didn't have in last year, that's for the paving for the other, either the school boards or municipalities. where we'll have to buy asphalt to put that down for them.
Alicia, this is just a concept, but and I mentioned this before, but particularly for a capital equipment heavy department like Public Works and maybe a few others, would it be feasible to put in the future budgets like a line for depreciation or replacement cost, so that we don't have just a sudden $2 million or something for replacing X amount of vehicles or equipment or whatever, that we have just an ongoing what would you say, replacement or aging schedule and a commensurate line item for that? Or
I think that's a good idea, and conceptually the way I've thought about possibly doing that is setting something up where we fund that capital projects account each year, not with maybe the full amount of a piece of equipment, but if we took the total cost of all of our buildings and the total cost of all of our equipment, and then we came up with some annual amount that we put into that capital projects fund, and then at whatever point in time we needed to purchase something, we would have the funding available there to do that with. And you know, on buildings, a lot of times you see if you have to re-roof a building after 25 years, that could be a fair amount of money.
Especially if you're only collecting $1 rent, but anyway.
Or even, you know, if we went and bought a new D8 dozer or a new excavator, which we've done, we haven't bought the dozer recently, but we bought an excavator at close to $250,000. So I think going forward, that potentially could be something that the board would want to look at doing. We hadn't really been financially in a position to do that, but I think now we're working ourselves toward that. So I think that's probably a good strategy if we can come up with a percentage that would work. I think it would take a little bit of research, but I think that's a good idea.
And like you say, for facilities as well as equipment, because working toward a no surprises budget, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move into solid waste collection. We did have a CPI increase in our trash hauling, but the amount that we budgeted last year will cover that based on the tonnage that we have run so far this year and that we're projecting to run. So in this year's budget, we're actually ahead of schedule as far as that. We will not expend the full $2 million this year because our tonnage is not running as high as it has in the past.
That's a miracle.
Yeah.
Shh, don't speak too loudly.
Yeah. So hopefully we're going, based on projections, we should be able to stay within that $2 million even with the CPI increase there. And we're running under budget in our other two line items too. So I think we're going to be okay in our solid waste collection for the next year.
And so just so I understand, because this is a surprise, that even though we have historically and for the past couple, 3 years particularly, had quite exorbitant increases in this area, we think the budget is okay without an increase.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's great.
So I got one question also. As far as the employees, my understanding they're employed by a private company, contract labor, correct?
For the convenience centers, yes.
Okay.
They're employed by SMI.
Okay.
Or SLM. I'm sorry, I used the wrong.
At any point in time, we kind of had a brief discussion last year about it, but at any point in time, do we have the ability to include those folks in raises or request that they get a raise, or how does that work?
I think that would need to be structured into the SLM contract.
Okay.
All of the other categories in family services, transportation, and then our not-for-profits that we are funding are staying the same.
One quick question, and I just have to ask questions here, sorry, but for the mental health expense, as much as mental health is a problem, are we okay with no increase? I mean, how are we doing in that area?
Well, we're funding more mental health in the jail through the ARPA fund. So we're taking care of that aspect, but as far as the, are you talking about funding for pathways?
Yeah.
That's a deep question, and I'm not sure. I think that there needs to be more funding for mental health. But I think there needs to be a change in how that system works too. So, and some of that needs to be confinement, which I don't know that county government wants to get into that business. So the state has not increased their housing for confined mental services in quite some time. It looked like the state budget had some additional funding for mental health services, but it didn't look like they were increasing capacity at our location in Columbus, which is where you see the serious mental health. I think Pathways is real good at follow-up, and once somebody has gone into intensive treatment, they do a good job of maintaining that person once they get out. But I think there's a need for intensive mental health, and I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think that's properly funded. But I think to properly fund it, it would take millions of dollars.
There's just nowhere to send those folks when you run a call with them, or they show up at the ER or where else. There's not a facility for them anymore like it used to be.
Well, there's a short term.
Yeah.
They'll send them to Willowbrook for 5 days, and
some of them need other than that.
But they need extensive 6-month, 1-year facilities, and Columbus is full. I mean, we have people in the jail waiting to get into those services, and so we have increased the amount of money that's in the jail for those services to try to help stabilize them while they're at the jail, and maybe get them into a situation where they can be released. That's a big discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably a community-wide discussion that needs to come with a big pot of money, based on the little bit I know about it.
On Ms. Searcy, on the transit program, I understand how we redid the accounting a couple of years ago at the request of the auditors, but essentially that amount has stayed the same, and I understand that again for this year. But as far as repair and maintenance and gas and oil, I mean, did we just have that number at a level that it sustained itself? Because a lot of the departments we've obviously increased knowing that those expenses are up, so I'm just making sure we're not overlooking that here.
Yeah, that's pretty much in line with where our spending is this year.
Well, and through GDOT, we did get, I can't remember, it was 1 or 2 new vehicles, I apologize, that have been replaced. So making sure the vehicles are running equally, because we do keep that one extra in reserve the way the program is set up. So making sure that the vehicles are rotated to not have one be really, really high and one really, really low. But I believe so I apologize, I can't remember. Three Rivers just replaced, I think, 1, if not 2 of them.
Okay.
Recreation, we've got an increase in participants, so we've increased the officials line. The program expense athletics, we got to replace some football helmets. Those have expiration dates on them. I didn't realize that. But we're to the point of needing to replace some of those. And then in the concessions, we're adding 2 new concession stands. So we will increase the amount there. And then we're increasing building repair and maintenance for some items at the Veterans Building and the Pavilion. And then advertising increase for some radio ads. And then the national conference is in Atlanta this year, so we actually gained a little bit of expense there. Contractual services we're increasing for termite control and background checks. And then the non-office supplies, the new multi-purpose field, those are supplies for it, and the utilities are for the concession stand and the bathrooms at the multi-purpose fields. Uniforms, we increased for an addition in some part-time staff, and then the seeds, plants, and fertilizer, they're going to try to put out more mulch and do some complex beautification out there just to make things look better.
Do you know how much you estimated on the revenue side by adding those 2 concession stands? Most of it is expenses, but that's obviously going to be offset by some revenue.
I didn't increase the revenue any, I don't think, because let me make sure.
You did.
I did increase it by 10,000, but we're running a little bit behind where I projected for the concessions that we have open right now. So that's why I didn't increase it the full amount.
But in theory, that's a wash. But in other words, you're still expecting additional revenues, but you had to adjust it based off what's happening in the current fiscal year.
Right.
And last, right, okay.
Parks, we got equipment repair and maintenance. I had made a mistake last year. If you'll see, FY23 was 11,000. FY24 should have been 12,000, but I left a 0 off when we did that, and that was in the approved budget. So I've fixed that, plus added some for the trail maintenance at Moss Ferry and the additional trails that they're going to add at McIntosh. In contractual services, we've got we're putting in tap and pay credit card machines, and that's going to cost a little bit more. And then we're doing termite coverage at McIntosh. And then in supplies non-office, we've added some expenses for the 2 new bathrooms at McIntosh and anticipation of putting in bathrooms at Moss Ferry. And then the gas and oil cleaning at Moss Ferry, if we get those bathrooms put in, and then additional mowing that'll have to go on over there, and the travel back and forth.
And we'll be able to track from that tap pay and credit cards or whatever these machines are, because I would have to think that their revenue will go up from being able to accept that, or were they already accepting cards? It's just new machines.
We're accepting cards now, but the tap and pay I think are more secure.
Okay.
And most all cards have chips now, so that makes it easier and quicker.
Are they going to continue to collect cash also?
Yes.
Okay.
Until it's outlawed.
I just have a question I just thought about. What's the situation? Just help me understand. I won't be here that much longer, so maybe it doesn't matter. But anyway, at one point, Ben was over community development and parks, and then we had somebody else over parks, and he was phasing out of parks, and now he's back in parks. So I just wondered, what's the current situation and what are we moving toward? Are we going to have a separate designated experience parks person eventually, or is Ben going to continue to be in that role of being over community development and parks?
Ben's going to continue to be in that role for a while. I don't know how long of a while, but yes, the idea is ultimately to have a parks director. Just kind of at this point training some people, seeing who will step up, and or if we do have someone that is able to do that, that's on staff now. But at this point, I think Parks still needs Ben's oversight. He's pretty clued in to how things work, and he's willing to make some hard calls and make hard decisions, which not everybody's willing to do. And you know, sometimes you can't have everything, so you got to decide is A best or B best, and Ben's good at doing that. So until he can get someone else trained to fill those shoes, I think he'll be running a dual purpose for us.
This is just my 2 cents worth for the future, and you remaining folks will have to deal with this or not, but I would just think that eventually, with the addition of the McIntosh acreage and river frontage, with Moore's Bridge potential, with Banning Mills sitting there, and then that's not even to speak of all the other parks, the Little Tallapoosa and so on, that we could work toward having a professional, experienced parks person that knows the marketing side as well as the management side of our public parks, and that could be offset by increasing our ecotourism dollars eventually, just conceptually, because I think we have gems in our county parks, and of course my district, particularly with the addition of the McIntosh property and Moore's Bridge, I think we could develop that area in an ecotourism way, and we need an experienced park person who not only knows the management side of equipment repairs and facility repairs and all that, but also the marketing side. I think eventually working toward that would be a good idea for the county.
I think you're right. In the Ag Center, she requested to move the AmeriCorps person to a full-time position. We pay that person $3,000 stipend now. That stipend would increase to $4,000 and give her another full-time person. So I kind of supported that. And utilities for the Ag Center up a little bit, so we increased that. In codes enforcement, we increased their telephone expense. Their computer services, they had to go to a different program to do some of the things they were wanting to do, and the cost of that's about $2,400 a year. And then their telephone is hosted now, so that's adding an expense to their budget. And in economic development, we didn't make any changes. The change in debt service is basically moving money from interest to principal as we get further into those debt payments. And then the last line was money that we had transferred out to Carroll County Mental Health. We added that into the sheriff's budget. He has got a trained person in crisis intervention now, and they're going to run their own crisis intervention team. So we moved that money to the sheriff's office instead of paying that to the city of Carrollton.
Thank them for that. Anytime there's a negative on the expense line item, that's a good thing.
Alicia, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Is planning and zoning code enforcement, are they fully staffed?
No, there may be, I think they've got one vacancy in the office. I think they're,
Been advertising for one.
Yeah.
I think codes
why I
enforcement
was-
is fully staffed, but, they have a office
Yeah,
person.
the officers that are out were fully staffed.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
Alicia, overall, just humor me or help me out here. So, I understand if you say about the typical 7% for overall salary increases, fine with that. I'm always for county employees, as you know from the years past. But when you look at the consumer price index for 2024, particularly most recent time period, say from the last 6 months or so, that consumer price index is about 3.2%. Probably going to stay there. I wouldn't imagine it would go up to 5%. If you take that same consumer price index to our fiscal year, apply it to our fiscal year 24 budget, you end up with a budget of about 75 million, which is, about 3.2% above our 73 million current. Instead, the proposed budget is increasing by 9.2%. So help me buy, I guess, the 9.2% over the 3.2% consumer price index, because I know possibly we will be getting inquiries. I can justify something more than 3.2% based on the salaries hovering around 7%, which would, if our salaries are, 60-70% of our operating budget, which would bump that up from a 3.2% consumer price index to maybe 5.5%, 6% even. But how do we go from the 6%, say mathematically, to 9.2%? And I know we've got the additional state court judge, but
That's gonna be a million.
Yeah.
A
I don't know if that
million one.
bumps it up to 9.2. I'm just trying to mathematically lay it out, because I'm a visual person. So 9.2% versus the consumer price index of 3.2%, and our constituents are gonna say, hey, my social security and my wages increased around 3%, but you guys are spendthrifts at the county because you're increasing the budget 9.2%, which is 3 times more than my paycheck's increasing. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around that, and I can justify it with the 7% employee salary increase. I'm fine with that, and with the state court additional funds there. Is there anything beyond that would support the 9% increase?
Well, like we talked about, you got about a 20% increase in that risk management line. And
I'll let you, we'll be.
you're gonna have an increase in health insurance. I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but it's gonna be above CPI. I projected it around 7%, about where we are on employees. And then you've got the additional EMS unit.
Ambulance,
Right.
yeah.
That's really not a percentage change. I mean, that's a dollar. Well, you could count it as a percent, but it's going to be a large dollar amount when you consider that they got 3.4% CPI plus $50,000 plus a unit.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to look at, I think you're going to be at above the CPI on let's see, you got a large increase here in the sheriff's office for the food cost. That was significantly more than CPI. And in fire, you've got,
Yeah, I noticed there,
almost a 10% increase.
yeah, 10% increase in salaries there versus the around 7%.
Well, I don't have a calculator, but the total increase, just with the increase in the other increases that they've asked for, just to try to adequately fund the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 10% would be $1.2 million, and you're at $1,164,000. So, yeah, so EMS is probably going to be about 20% too. And then adding a person in animal services, you're going to be at, let's see, 10, probably 13, 14% in animal services too. So off the top of my head, that's what I can tell you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you want more analysis than that, it'll take
Yeah.
more than me just running through some papers
No,
and
that's
at it
fine.
visually.
Yeah, yeah. And we won't have, this budget, in fact, then, I guess, yes or no answer, honors the budget system in that we're not anticipating, like happened last year in that department, the 2 weeks after we said, here's the budget, there was another 5% expenditure for equipment. So this is a fully funded, we won't have some surprise in 2-3 weeks. I mean, this is something that we anticipate this level of expenditure, I guess.
As long as something doesn't break that we're not expecting to break.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's hard for me to know about every piece of equipment in the county and know how it's functioning, and if it's functioning properly today, and in 2 weeks it's not. I don't know if I can forecast that or not.
Yeah.
I do have a list of capital expenditures that has been requested by department heads.
Yeah.
And as soon as we completed the budget discussion, I wanted to go over this with you so you could see what the departments had requested. So if we're ready to move on, I can pass these out, and then you can see what the capital requests are. Some of these don't have dollar amounts beside of them because we don't know how much it's going to cost at this point, but some of them are just ideas of what we need, and some of them are, I've got actual funding amounts on them.
While you're handing that out, just a quick note, funding the sheriff's department, the fire department, and the ambulance service. You know, every department has part of public safety in it. I mean, animal services, community development, and codes, but just those top three that we tend to think of strictly as public safety is $37,156,230,000, which is 46% of our budget. So we really do fund public safety. And like I said, if you go back and add in animal control, you were to go back and add codes, you go back and add in your public works, we really do fund majority of this budget on public safety.
I'd say a couple other items, they may not seem like big ticket items, but if you're comparing it against the CPI index, your utilities in multiple departments, I think, are going to raise higher than what that number would be. And your postage in several, we've got some that are 10 grand, 14 grand. I mean, stuff that's heavy, like the tax commissioner's office, that's dependent upon everything she does is something she has to mail out by law.
That's right.
So you've got, those are some other built in each one of the departments that are going to be higher than the CPI index. And I'd say another thing, not that we're trying to overpromise and underdeliver, but in that second state court, ultimately down the road, not only are we going to deliver justice, if you will, expeditedly, but we're also going to have some revenue stream generated there to help offset some stuff. So I think that is important, that it's not only self-sustaining, but we'll have some additional monies there, I think, to help, whether it's in our mind, we're saying to help continue to support the court systems or just in the general fund, and generally speaking, that is going to be a positive move to help with the balance sheet as well.
So to start the discussion about the capital purchases request, and some of this is not specifically capital purchases, it's just some things that we need to fund or recommend to fund kind of as our year-end money. But just so you kind of know where some of this is coming from, the lost revenue from the ARPA fund that came back into the general fund, that was used for governmental services. And that was a total of $10 million that's going to come back into the general fund this year. And that was not in our last year budget. So that's going to be over and above what we had budgeted for 2024. So so we'll have that $10 million, and then just in our normal operations, in savings and excess collections that are going above where we budgeted last year, either cost savings or revenue that's coming in above where we budgeted, we're going to have about another $5 million. So we've either agreed to purchase or already have purchased about $7 million in property. So that'll need to go in as a year, because that was bought out of the general fund, so that'll have to go in as a year-end adjustment. The next line item, I've kind of got a number in there as a placeholder. I haven't verified this number yet. I'm still having some communication with ACCG on this. But our pension, the amount that we fund for our old pension plan, we're funded at about 62 or 63%. Their recommendation is that we be funded at 90%. So to get to that 90% funding level, we need to add about $250,000 to that pension liability. And I think this would be a good time to consider doing that. The chairman would also like to fund an employee bonus at least equivalent to what we did last year, and that's going to be somewhere around $2.4 million. I didn't put the amount in there because I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I think it'll be somewhere around $2.4 million if we do what we did last year. Based on the quotes that we have gotten to finish the 5th floor, we're going to need about another $850,000 to do that the way the quotes have come in. And so I would recommend that we consider taking $850,000 of this money and putting it in the capital projects fund to fund that 5th floor build out.
Alicia, have you calculated as well that the FF&E may be more as well? In other words, we got the build out and then we've got to furnish it.
FFI.
I am not sure that is included in that. I may need a discussion with you on the side to determine what that might be. Good point. I don't think I thought about that in this number.
That's a substantial number.
Elections is looking at either some kiosk that they can mount their elections equipment to and keep it all put together so they can do their updates and keep the charging up on it without having to disassemble and reassemble it each time. We got a cost on that, but it was pretty high, and so they're looking at some other options. But at a minimum, they would like to buy some carts that will probably be around $10,000 or $12,000. They have to be heavy-duty carts because they're the one set of this equipment weighs about 200 pounds, so it has to be a cart that can handle that much weight. The kiosks were significantly more than that. They were about $10,000 a piece. So they're looking to see if they can find some other kiosks that may be more reasonable. But we should have a number on that sometime soon. The tax assessor needs some scanners and a computer. The tax commissioner needs some new scanners. The public defender needs a new server. The recreation department has asked for additional cameras in areas where they don't have camera coverage. Some renovations in the gym and the concession stands. They need some new computers and some new furniture. And then their big ask is for about $350,000 to finish out that LED light project, which is all the outdoor lighting at the rec department.
And not to interrupt you, but they're going to go ahead and be issuing an RFP with the understanding that we, the board, may not fund this, but in order to get on a time schedule, if we choose to do it, they're going to go ahead and issue the RFP. So I just don't want you to see that and then think that they had presumptions that we were going ahead with this, but to follow with the timeline and get it done, they're issuing an RFP. We can always vote no on it, but I just didn't want you to be taken by surprise if you saw that.
In the last few months, didn't we do something about lights and lighting out there?
We have put money in there to do that. Well, initially, we were just going to redo the existing lights. And then when we started looking at the cost of doing that, we realized that it just costs a little bit more to do the LED lights. And ultimately, if we do the LED lights, it's going to save us on utility cost. So we increased that last year, and then we thought we had enough in there and came back with some quotes, and it wasn't enough. So
this is in addition to what we have
that's in
done.
addition to what we've already put aside for it. But you're correct. We have put money aside previously.
That sheds more light on it. So.
Juvenile court furniture, they just need some new furniture. They've been over there for a while and they've got stuff that's broken. The iPads that y'all use are getting a lot of age on them, and they're smaller screens, so we're requesting $10,000 to replace all the iPads with some newer, larger screens. Juvenile court has asked for some technology money, but we're in the IT upgrade over there. I think they may get what they need, so Judge Palmer was going to get with Jacob and confirm whether he actually needed IT money or whether the IT upgrade was going to cover his needs. Public safety, the EVOC property, we feel like we need to fence that to keep it secure. With the activities that'll be going on out there, we don't want people on the property roaming around, so we think we probably need to put a nice fence around that. The road going in, we don't know yet, we haven't had it tested, whether it'll support the fire trucks or not, but if it won't, we're going to have to upgrade that road. And then the sheriff wants to put a target system out there. And then we put a placeholder number in for an EVOC building of $650. I don't know if that's close or not. I used the number that we had for the USDA building. That's where that number came from. So that's may or may not be enough. So all of those items are really related to the EVOC system, or the EVOC property. And then now fire did request that we build a burn building out there, I don't know if we're really ready to do that at this point, but that may be something you want to consider funding too. I think, you're around $600,000-$700,000 potentially on building something like that, which is mind-blowing that you'd build a building that expensive to burn. But if you're going to burn it a bunch of times, I guess it has to be pretty steady. There are new chest compression machines that we could buy to go at each fire department, and those are about $20,000 a piece. You put one on each truck, and what those do is continue CPR. So they would start this when they got to a scene where somebody needed CPR. They could put this machine on them, and rather than the fireman having to ride to the ER with that person, the CPR machine would ride with that person, and the fireman could stay in service on other fire calls or on other medical calls. And West Georgia Ambulance is talking about buying these machines too. So essentially what would happen is when they show up, if our machine is doing compressions, then they would loan us their machine to stay on our truck in case we had an immediate call for another CPR call. And then they would take our machine, and at some point those would get swapped back out. But that could save some labor in the fire department. Supposedly these do more consistent, accurate chest compressions than a person does. And you don't have to swap off. So if you had somebody doing it, they get tired, you have to put somebody else. You don't have to do that. They can just keep doing it.
Alicia, have we added enough of those to cover our QRVs as well, in addition to the actual fire truck, or do you know? Or we maybe
That's 2 per station.
per station, okay.
So you could put them in the QRVs, or you could put them in the fire trucks. That would be the option of the person over that station, I guess,
Okay.
to make that determination. They need a fleet AC machine and a tire machine for the fire trucks. They need 13 AEDs and 7 imaging cameras. And then they need some replacement for the SCBA machines and a workstation to work on those. And then they need some radios for the fire training center radios, and a forcible entry door, and a gear, so a dryer to dry the turnout gear with. And then they want to replace this mattresses at the stations. There's 33 of those that they want to replace. They need some computers. And I didn't list what that equipment purchase is. I'll have to go back and check that. And then they want additional turnout gear for $50,000. And then the animal services truck is right here. So that would be the new animal service truck for the new animal control officer if we approve that. We're getting quotes on materials to redo a bridge at McIntosh that's not functional. And the Bobcat high flow pump has gone out, so we need to replace that. And then we have, and I think this kind of goes back to your point, Commissioner Reynolds, reforestation. We have trees that are dying in the parks, and we don't really have a method of replacing them at this point. And that kind of goes back to our equipment in our buildings. You know, if you've got trees dying, you want to replant trees to replace the ones that are dead. So they've asked for $30,000 to put some nice sized trees back into some areas where some of those have died. and fallen down. And then they need about $3,000 worth of tools to go on their service truck. In solid waste, she's requested a yard dog for the transfer station. I think that's a small tractor trailer truck, kind of like you see Jones Transport running down at Southwire, to move the trailers around at the solid waste. I don't think we have one of those right now. And then a lockable shed where they can put tools and things with gas motors where they don't have to store them in the transfer station building. And then they need some office furniture and a printer.
Well, excuse me, what's the yard dog for? What trailers are we moving or something?
The trailers that you pack the trash in, that they transfer up to the landfill.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll pack a trailer, and once it gets packed, then they'll roll it out and roll an empty one in there. And right now, I'm not sure what they're using to do that with.
I was wondering, what do they use now?
I don't know. But this was what that was. It was one of those smaller trucks that have the fifth wheel lift on it, where you can just drive back under it and lift it up without getting out of the truck and move it.
And they normally have a magnet strip on the front that as it is going around, it's picking up screws and nails and stuff to help keep from tires being flattened.
Oh, okay.
I was thinking a dog that was protection dog.
Yeah.
It's an expensive.
That's where I was going. I was
Expensive
thinking,
beagle.
There's one of those animal shelter dogs that's going to move out to solid waste. That's where my brain was going. We're getting close to the end, aren't we, with the caffeine wearing off?
The ambulance money is the money that we agreed to pay up front to West Georgia Ambulance for the equipment, the new truck that they needed and the equipment related to that. Public Works has requested a new fuel truck. Now that they're going to take the bed off of their old truck, so it's just the vehicle part of the fuel truck. They're going to take the fueling system off of their old truck and put it on a new chassis. And then they would like to get 2 new mowing tractors, and I think that includes, no, that doesn't, that's just the tractors. That doesn't include the mowers. And then they want to put an electronic gate in at Public Works. Community Development, they just want to get uniform shirts for the people in the office. The codes enforcement already get uniforms, but they want to get some a consistent look within the office out there. And then that's not PARS, that's Parks. They need a mulching machine, another mulching machine attachment for their Bobcat. The Ag Center, I don't have a breakout of the cost. The total's about $100,000. But we want to put some county branding out there in the Ag Center, just the county logo. A new phone system for them out there. They're actually going to have to buy some equipment because their phone system is actually a repurposed phone system from somewhere else in the county, and it's just totally out of date at this point. An LCD projector to go up kind of in the eating area where you can do a presentation.
And actually, I think we changed that to a TV screen. I'm sorry, I didn't. A little bit less expensive, and then you don't have to turn the lights out. So
Okay.
I'll kind of take over right here. A lot of this came from the report from the committee that was put together. And so we've been out there going through all the employees' list and figuring out what really were the top things that we could afford and really the top things that make the most impact at this current moment. So Jacob is working on the phone system, and we decided a TV screen, which would be a lot less expensive than an LCD projector, but making sure that the guests or presenters that came to speak, and this is in the kitchen area, the like dining area, to make sure that they could still be able to hook up with their laptops or whatever they brought, their iPhones, that they could present up there. But then you don't have to go turning the lights off to put the screen up. So that's a TV screen, a demonstration kitchen. And Davey and I have been working on that with Victoria, a smaller area there again to be able to do all these classes that Victoria is doing and some of the others with 4-H. So you're not in the big kitchen, and you have an area that opens up the dining area, so there's more classroom participation is what the demonstration. And the dishwasher, there again, I think we've repaired the dishwasher. There was, that was as of last week too. I think we may have some, instead of buying a new dishwasher, we may just have some repairs on the dishwasher. And then the fan. So a lot of this stuff came from that report that was done back in the fall for us.
So these capital purchase proposed expenditures, aside from like the pension liability and 2.4 million for employee bonus, so on, these would be SPLOST fund, or would they be general fund, or a combination?
They would be general fund. All of this would come out of the general fund.
Okay, and these expenditures are now not in our budget, or they are?
They are not in the budget.
Okay. So, what is the, I'm I guess a little confused. So, if these are not in our budget now, are these things that we're anticipating adding to the 79 million budget?
This is what we would add to the 24 budget.
This is for
all
the extra money you have left over.
Correct.
I got you.
Right, like the
Okay.
last couple of years, you know,
That's where I
we've
was.
had extra funds because of areas, line items that Alicia and I budgeted to be conservative have come in higher. And so we're anticipating this extra money so that there again, like we talked about, and you mentioned earlier too, it'd be nice if we had a maintenance line, but then if you divide a maintenance line up by all the different departments, you put 5,000 here, 10,000 there, that does not cover a roof of a fire station. So the last couple of years, we've been very lucky to be continuing to check off a lot of these broken items, a lot of these items that we've needed, we just have done without. So this, again, is this year's budget that is coming in a little higher than we anticipated to go ahead and start checking off a bunch of stuff that's broken again, for lack of a better word, or not even necessarily broken, but to make sure we don't have to take out a SPLOST over the next few years, because, you know, the things for Public Works, we would have to buy those out of SPLOST. So if we can take them out of this year, it continues to reserve SPLOST for other items, as well as things to continue to enhance what we're providing citizens.
So best I recall, in the old days, or a year or 2 or 3 ago, we did as far as excess revenues, we did the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Right.
Bonuses, equipment, and something else. Reserves, that's right. So, what is our, I guess, balance now? And what do these expenditures total? Because I don't see a total. Is it around 10?
Well, I didn't put a total because I don't know
shop.
what some of them are.
Some of them not.
And so
But given what we know now, what's the total about? And the property purchases, are those ones that we have purchased, or ones that we might purchase, or?
They're ones that we have purchased and one that we might purchase.
Okay.
And as far as the breakdown of what Commissioner Reynolds is talking about, where a few years ago we were on a trend, the 1/3 back to the employees, 1/3 in reserves, and then 1/3 on capital purchases, or whatever you want to call it. And I think I think that the board felt like we had reached on a reserve side effectively where we needed to be, and so we were kind of taking that 1/3 out, if you will, and either putting back into the employees or other things that we needed to fix on purchases, because we didn't want to get the reserve account, if you will, too high. trying to keep that in check with our ACCG guidelines and so on and so forth. So I think the model has changed some, at least from last year, for that very reason. We're still using it effectively, but trying to put 1/3 back into reserve, we've got reserves within reason of where they need to be. So we're trying to fix other things instead of just cash hoarding that 1/3, if you will.
Right.
What
Well,
is our reserve amount now? What is it roughly? Any idea?
40 million.
Okay, I knew it was somewhere close.
This totals about 12 million. Not quite, I don't think.
Okay.
That's adding it in my head.
Yeah. Okay. So when you say 40 million, that's general fund,
Yes,
40 million? Excess?
yes.
Okay.
Fund balance. So I think I think our reserves are adequately funded. And normally we wouldn't have this amount of money to deal with because we wouldn't have the lost revenue coming back from ARPA. So that's where a large portion of this money's coming from. I know there's a lot of money here.
And it's a starting total of how much you said?
12, about 12 million that has numbers beside it.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, because the 10 million is from ARPA. It's not just that the citizens have overpaid.
Yeah.
This was ARPA money. So we would not be, if we didn't have that 10 million, this list would not look this way.
Well,
I mean, we still need the items, but
it came from ARPA into the general
Yes.
fund. So ultimately it is general
Well-
fund money, but we've got that because we claimed the lost revenue from ARPA under the final rule that the Treasury allowed us to do that under, and bring that back into our general fund for reimbursement of governmental services.
I just want to clarify, it's not property taxes.
That's correct.
That's what I want to clarify.
That's
It's
correct.
not property taxes. And again, the budget that Alicia and I just presented to you, all factors staying about the same that you and I have worked on with the department heads and the court system and the other elected officials, we still plan to do a full rollback, if not very close to a full rollback with this budget. So this is just end of this year's money that has, there again, put us in a very nice situation, plus the ARPA funds. So if we can, these are from the departments, and if you are agreeable, then it does save us down the road from taking some funds out of SPLOST or trying to put more money into a general budget that we do need to at some point address that, Ernie. You are correct. The maintenance lines for departments need to be continued to be looked at. And I'll be meeting with the department heads starting sometime late summer about a new 5-year plan and a plan for SPLOST. So we will be presenting that to y'all at some point in the future.
So this will leave us about, round figures, 25, 28 million in excess, which then would be supported by ACCG's recommendation of approximately.
No, I think I think we'll end up with about $40 million in reserve.
Okay, after this.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
This is bonus money.
Yeah, yes, because there again, we
But we can.
budgeted very correctly last year, not putting in numbers that we weren't comfortable with, and having to hold your breath over the year wondering, are we going to make this number, and
So this is items that's gonna make our service better for the community. And it's not having to come out of the general fund.
For a change.
So these are working documents.
Yep.
So, we'll continue to work on these over the next month or so. And I feel like this budget's pretty close. The capital purchases is the one I think that we'll continue to work on. We still may have a little work to do on the budget, but I think all in all it's pretty close, unless somebody has some big recommendations that they want to see done. But
Well, I'm not sure if I know how to ask this question. We're looking at right at an $80 million budget. Is that right? 79,996,649. That's about 80 million. We got 40 million in reserve. Now is this, and I guess I'm looking at a balance here. Is this $80 million budget, we're not going to continue to keep adding and adding and adding money into that reserve. We're walking a line here. Is that what I'm hearing? Because I get a lot of questions about that reserve money.
I would like to say that we're walking a line, but sometimes
Something breaks, you have no control over.
I mean, like sales taxes continue to come in better than we forecasted year over year.
You and I have talked about that, and I get, what I hear from the state, I get real concerned. I know we're doing well, and I'm not saying we need to increase. I guess you're not hearing what I'm saying. I don't want to keep collecting so much money that we keep throwing money into the reserve pile.
No, that's not what we're doing.
Okay.
We knew that we needed to reach a particular percentage based on ACCG.
Oh, I know. I realize all that, right?
So
That's what I'm hearing.
we shouldn't keep throwing money over there into reserve just to keep reserving, because that's not a frugal way to use taxpayers' money.
It's not. That's
Right.
where I'm going
So
with this.
I say once that's funded, then we can turn and look at other things that we can do with taxpayer money to increase services in Carroll County, and keep our budget where it's supposed to be. Because I agree with, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. We wanted to get it there, and y'all know, like I know, it's been low, and getting it there was one of the goals. But once it's there, we can look other directions, and not just continue to sit money over there and stockpile it. We don't need to do that. I mean,
No.
I don't think anybody's trying to do that either.
No, and from my understanding, that's where we at now. We've hit that point, and that's why you
Yeah.
said the model needs to change from that 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3, somewhere
Yeah,
along that line.
so if you look at ACCG, and there's different ways you can
That's right.
call out the statistics, but basically they want you to have 3 months worth of working capital. So basically, we've got 6 months. There, I asked Miss George, were we within guidelines? She sees some, depending on when their fiscal year starts, when their tax revenue comes in from property taxes. There's so many different models you can look at, but she has some that has a full year's worth in reserve, and she does not think that's necessarily too much based off of their model. So it's subjective in how you look at it, but if the minimum is 3 months and we're double the minimum, I think that's healthy, but then we also don't want to get too healthy that it looks like we're hoarding money. So I'm only one person, and it's a subjective topic, but what we're doing here is not adding back into the reserve. We're fixing things that need to be fixed. We're investing back in the employees, is what we're doing, right, wrong, or indifferent, which I think is right, but we've changed the model from where we were at because we've brought that up to double what the minimum requirement is. But there again, we could double that and not necessarily be out of bounds. That's for this board to decide, but based off of our auditor's recommendation, she feels confident that it's at a healthy location where it's at now.
I'm comfortable with the 6 months, and I think that's something we can go out and justify to our constituents when we get questioned. That's the way I feel.
And with the,
And, based on the past, we don't want to continue to dip in the SPLOST to do a lot of things. Because, if you fund public works and things like that out of SPLOST, you're not going to get a lot of other things done because that's a big budget. But being able to have just some room here to be able to fund some things and get some things done for them, without going that direction, and then use those SPLOST dollars for other things, I just think it just puts us in a better place, because we have not been in that place in the past, and we're, so to be where we are right now, first of all, is a testament to everybody sitting in this room right now, and Alicia, especially to you. Thank you for what you do, so.
our
Well,
new,
this is better than our service.
Yeah.
It's just things that are needed that we have a way to finance or take care of them.
That's right.
We don't need it in the general fund.
That's right.
So,
This
that's where
time next year, we might not have funds like
Right.
this.
That's
because,
right.
Like I said,
Might be
we're putting a
different.
full rollback in, and depending on the economic,
That's right.
of the sales tax and other things like that, we may not find ourselves in this situation. We've been very lucky the last couple of years. We have found ourselves in this, but So you, and yes, so no funds are going back into reserves at this moment. They've been funneled into taking care of items that we need.
Well, y'all have done exactly what I wanted you to do when I asked that question.
So with expenditures of about 6.5 million a month, like you say, we've got now about, we will, with the 40 million in reserves, have about 6 months or so. Yeah.
So at the May meeting, I'll be presenting to you a balanced budget like I do every single year. If there's any tweaking to this, I'll let you know that night. But remember, this is the one that, by the charter, I have to advertise a balanced budget. And then you still vote on it in June. So, we will, keep giving you information as necessary or as requested.
Fair enough.
And if y'all are done, if there's no further questions, I will adjourn the work session. Is that good with everybody? I see you packing up. Okay, I'm going to adjourn the